When we think about celebrities, we imagine glamour, money, private chefs, and personal trainers. To the outside world, fame looks like the ultimate ticket to health and longevity. After all, with endless resources at their fingertips, shouldn't stars live longer, healthier lives than the rest of us? But history has proven the opposite. In Hollywood and the music industry, one silent killer has struck again and again, claiming legends at the height of their fame. That killer isn't drugs, alcohol, or scandal, though those often made the headlines. The hidden culprit is obesity. Obesity doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about talent, wealth, or worldwide adoration. Many stars who once lit up stages and screens eventually lost their battles not just with fame's pressures, but with the relentless health consequences of carrying too much weight. Their stories are both tragic and revealing. Here are the lives and deaths of some of the most famous people who were taken too soon, not just by circumstance, but by the heavy burden of obesity. Elvis Presley, the king's heavy crown. Elvis Presley, the undisputed king of rock and roll, was only 42 when he died. Millions of fans remember him for his swiveling hips, golden voice, and magnetic stage presence. But behind the music, Elvis lived a darker reality. His diet consisted of fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches, greasy comfort foods, and an almost endless supply of prescription pills. Over the years, his weight ballooned, and the once trim heartthrob was hardly recognizable. On August 16, 1977, Elvis was found unresponsive in his Graceland mansion. The official cause was a heart attack, worsened by his dependence on drugs. But doctors have repeatedly pointed out that his obesity, poor nutrition, and sedentary lifestyle made his heart too weak to endure the stress. In the end, it wasn't just the fame, the pressure, or the scandal that killed Elvis. It was his body overwhelmed by years of excess. Mama Cass Elliot, the voice that broke too soon. Cass Elliot, lovingly known as Mama Cass of the Mamas and the Papas, had one of the most soulful voices of the 1960s. Her harmonies defined an era, and her personality was as big as her presence on stage. But while fans adored her voice, Cass struggled with a lifelong battle against her weight. She was constantly targeted by cruel jokes, body shaming, and industry pressure to slim down. In an attempt to lose weight quickly, she often turned to extreme crash diets. This constant cycle of starvation and overeating left her body weak. At just 32 years old, Cass died in London from a heart attack. Although urban legend falsely claimed she choked on a ham sandwich, the truth was even sadder. Her heart simply couldn't take the strain of years of obesity and unhealthy dieting. The tragedy wasn't just the loss of a great artist, but the reminder that fame doesn't protect anyone from the brutal toll of health struggles. Luther Vandross, Silenced by Stroke. Few voices in R&B history were as smooth and soulful as Luther Vandross. His ballads became the soundtrack of love for millions, earning him fame, awards, and adoration. But while his voice was angelic, his health told another story. Vandross openly struggled with his weight throughout his career. At different times, he slimmed down dramatically, only to gain the weight back again. In 2003, Vandross suffered a massive stroke. He never fully recovered, and his health continued to decline until his death in 2005 at the age of 54. Doctors pointed to obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure as the culprits. His legacy lives on in his music, but his story is also a cautionary tale about how yo-yo dieting and lifelong weight struggles can devastate even the most gifted among us. Barry White, the voice of love, silenced by weight. Barry White was the voice of passion, desire, and romance. With his deep baritone and unforgettable songs, he built a career that defined love ballads in the 1970s and beyond. Yet behind the smooth vocals was a man battling constant health issues. His weight often exceeded 300 pounds, and with it came diabetes, high blood pressure, and kidney failure. By the late 1990s, Barry's health had worsened dramatically. In 2003, he died at the age of 58 from kidney disease and a fatal heart attack. Fans mourned the loss of his extraordinary talent, but doctors were clear. Obesity had played a direct role in weakening his body beyond repair. In many ways, Barry White's story highlights the paradox of fame. His voice was immortal, but his health was heartbreakingly fragile. John Candy, the gentle giant who laughed too little. John Candy was the heart of comedy in the 1980s and early 1990s. From Uncle Buck to planes, trains, and automobiles, his humor was warm, his timing impeccable, and his personality deeply relatable. But Candy carried more than just the weight of making people laugh. He also carried the heavy burden of obesity. By his 40s, John's weight had become a constant concern. He often joked about it on screen, but off camera, he struggled with food and lifestyle habits that made his health decline rapidly. Despite warnings from doctors, the combination of stress, work demands, and genetic predisposition to heart disease caught up with him. In 1994, while filming in Mexico, Candy suffered a fatal heart attack in his sleep. He was only 43. Fans worldwide mourned not just the loss of a great comedian, but the tragedy of a life cut short by an enemy that fame couldn't conquer. Dom DeLuise, a lifetime of struggles with weight. Dom DeLuise was another comedy legend, beloved for his larger-than-life characters and infectious laugh. He starred in Mel Brooks films, partnered often with Burt Reynolds, and became a fixture of American humor. But while audiences adored his roles, DeLuise's health was a different story. For most of his life, Dom struggled with obesity. His size became part of his comedic identity, but it also shadowed his personal well-being. Years of carrying excess weight led to heart problems and eventually cancer-related complications. In 2009, he died at the age of 75. Though he lived longer than many of his peers, his quality of life in his later years was severely compromised by obesity. He spent much of his career making others laugh, but behind the scenes he carried pain and fatigue that few truly understood. Chris Farley, comedy's brightest flame extinguished. Chris Farley was often called the heir to John Belushi. Wild, hilarious, and unstoppable on stage. His sketches on Saturday Night Live became instant classics, and his physical comedy was unmatched. But Farley, like Belushi, lived a life of extremes. His struggles with drugs and alcohol were public, but his obesity was equally destructive. By the late 1990s, Chris's weight had spiraled out of control, putting tremendous strain on his heart. In December 1997, he was found dead at just 33 years old. The official cause was a drug overdose, but obesity and advanced heart disease played a decisive role in his early death. His autopsy revealed the body of a man far older than his years, worn down by addiction and excess weight. Farley's death was a stark reminder that laughter often masks deep pain, and that obesity can silently push even the most energetic performers to the brink. John Pinette. When comedy becomes a cry for help. John Pinette was known for his self-deprecating humor, often poking fun at his size. Audiences laughed, but behind the jokes was a man living in constant battle with his weight. His routines about overeating weren't just comedy, they were reflections of his real struggles. By his 50s, Pinette's body had endured years of stress from obesity. He suffered from liver disease, diabetes, and other complications. In 2014, at the age of 50, he died of a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that blocked his lungs. Doctors confirmed that his weight was a major factor in his declining health. Unlike some comedians who lived recklessly, Pinette's story was one of slow, painful decline. His comedy made light of his struggles, but his death revealed just how devastating obesity can be, even for those who try to laugh it off. Victor Buono, a talent cut down early. Victor Buono was a talented actor best remembered for his role in the Batman television series of the 1960s and for his chilling performance in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. But Buono's career, like his life, was short-lived. Known for his large frame, he often played villainous or comedic roles that capitalized on his size. Behind the scenes, however, his health was crumbling. His weight pushed his body into constant strain, and by the age of 43, Buono suffered a fatal heart attack. His death was overshadowed by other Hollywood tragedies of the time, but it served as yet another example of how obesity can devastate even the brightest stars. Rosey Grier. A strong man brought down. Rosey Grier, a former NFL star turned actor and singer, was admired for his size and strength. On screen and off, he appeared indestructible, but Grier's size was both his gift and his curse. His weight contributed to serious health issues later in life, including heart problems that eventually claimed him. Though remembered as a gentle giant with a big smile, Grier's story illustrates the cruel paradox of obesity. What makes someone stand out in their prime can become the very thing that shortens their life. Ralphie May, a career built on jokes about weight. Ralphie May was one of the most popular stand-up comedians of the 2000s. His career took off after appearing on Last Comic Standing, where his quick wit and fearless jokes about his own size made him a fan favorite. He leaned heavily on self-deprecating humor, often turning his obesity into the punchline of his routines. But offstage, his struggles were no laughing matter. Weighing more than 400 pounds at times, Ralphie lived with constant health challenges. He was diagnosed with pneumonia shortly before his death in 2017, but it was a massive heart attack that claimed his life at just 45 years old. Doctors agreed that years of obesity had weakened his cardiovascular system beyond recovery. Fans were devastated, and the comedy world lost a rising icon. His story reflects a painful irony. The very thing that made him famous eventually contributed to his downfall. Jerry Garcia, rock and roll's heavy burden. Jerry Garcia, frontman of the Grateful Dead, was a counterculture icon whose music defined an era. His guitar playing inspired millions, and his band became a cultural phenomenon. But Garcia lived a life of extremes. Years of drug use, hard living, and obesity combined to create a perfect storm for his health. By the time he was in his 50s, Garcia's body was breaking down. He suffered from diabetes and recurring health problems tied to his weight. In 1995, while in rehab, he died of a heart attack at just 53 years old. While drug abuse grabbed the headlines, doctors confirmed that obesity had played a critical role in the deterioration of his health. Garcia's death reminded the world that lifestyle excesses, whether from drugs or overeating, can strip away even the most vibrant of musical legends. Francis "Fatty" Arbuckle, silent cinema's lost star. Before Elvis, before Farley, before Candy, there was Francis "Fatty" Arbuckle, the first true comedy superstar of Hollywood's silent film era. At a time when movies were just beginning to define global culture, Arbuckle became a household name. His rotund figure, expressive face, and slapstick antics made audiences roar with laughter. He wasn't just a comedian, he was a pioneer who proved that film could make people laugh as loudly as any stage performance. His nickname, Fatty, though cruel by today's standards, became inseparable from his identity and career. But Arbuckle's fame was not without pain. His weight, while part of his comedic persona, also caused serious health problems. He often performed physically demanding gags, pratfalls, tumbles, and stunts, which were punishing on a body already burdened by obesity. Off-screen, he dealt with constant exhaustion and the quiet toll that carrying so much extra weight takes on the heart. Tragedy struck in 1933 when Arbuckle died suddenly of a heart attack at just 46 years old. By then, his career had already been derailed by scandal, a sensational trial in the 1920s that destroyed his reputation despite his eventual acquittal. His death was overshadowed by controversy, but the deeper truth was that his body had long been under siege from obesity. Arbuckle, once hailed as the funniest man in America, became an early and haunting example of how obesity shortens not only careers, but lives. George Duncan, a star in the shadows. George Duncan may not be a household name today, but in the mid-20th century, he was a respected Scottish actor, known for his strong stage presence and nuanced performances. He wasn't a flashy celebrity like Elvis or a larger-than-life comedian like John Candy. Rather, he was a working actor who carved out a solid career in theater and film. Yet Duncan shared a struggle familiar to many entertainers on this list: his weight. Friends and colleagues described Duncan as charismatic and disciplined in his craft, but physically he was often plagued by fatigue. His weight, far above what was healthy, created constant strain on his cardiovascular system. In his early 50s, that strain reached its breaking point. At 52, Duncan died suddenly of a heart attack. Doctors later emphasized that obesity had played a decisive role in his death. While his passing did not dominate international headlines, it serves as another somber reminder that the dangers of obesity are not limited to megastars. Duncan's life and death illustrate a broader truth. Behind the spotlight, countless artists and performers struggle with the same silent killer. His story may not be widely remembered, but it deserves recognition as part of the long, tragic pattern of obesity's impact on talent. William Howard Taft, A President's Heavy Struggle. Obesity's reach extends beyond Hollywood and the music industry. One of the most famous cases in American history is William Howard Taft, the 27th President of the United States. Taft was brilliant, ambitious, and accomplished, serving not only as president, but later as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, making him the only person to hold both offices. Yet for all his achievements, Taft's size dominated his public image. At his peak, Taft weighed more than 330 pounds. Newspapers and political cartoons frequently mocked him, often depicting him as a caricature of gluttony. Stories circulated, some exaggerated, some true, about his weight causing him to get stuck in bathtubs. Behind the humor, however, was a man suffering the real consequences of obesity. He battled sleep apnea, high blood pressure, and severe heart strain. Despite his brilliance, Taft's health steadily declined. In 1930, at the age of 72, he died of cardiovascular disease. While he lived longer than many entertainers who succumbed to obesity, his size shaped his life in ways both public and private. He is remembered as a statesman and leader, but also as a man who struggled mightily against the burden of his own body. Taft's story reminds us that obesity is not confined to Hollywood or to entertainers. It affects leaders, thinkers, and world shapers as well. Michael Elmore, Big Mike G, a talent gone too soon. Michael Elmore, better known as Big Mike G, was a comedian and actor whose very presence filled a room. His booming laughter, quick humor, and approachable personality made him a favorite on the comedy circuit. He leaned into his nickname, Big Mike, often making jokes about his size, turning what others saw as a weakness into a badge of relatability and charm. But behind the humor was a man whose health was under constant siege. Obesity defined his life not only on stage but in the doctor's office. He suffered from recurring heart problems that grew worse with time. Each hospital visit seemed to bring the same message. His body was struggling to keep up with the strain of his weight. Ultimately, Mike's heart gave out. His career, which had been on the rise, was cut tragically short. Unlike stars such as Farley or Candy, whose deaths drew international headlines, Big Mike's passing was quieter, noted mostly within the comedy community. Yet his story is equally important. It shows that obesity does not only steal away household names, it also robs smaller stages and local audiences of talents who might have gone on to greatness. His death, while less publicized, is another painful reminder of the cost of obesity. Anna Nicole Smith, beauty, fame, and the burden of weight. Anna Nicole Smith was one of the most sensational figures of the 1990s and early 2000s. A model, actress, and reality television star, she embodied both glamour and chaos. Her sudden rise from small-town waitress to Playboy playmate and cultural icon was meteoric. But with fame came scrutiny, and Smith's weight was often at the center of it. Throughout her career, Anna Nicole's body became a public obsession. She gained and lost enormous amounts of weight, each transformation splashed across tabloids. Her struggles with obesity were not just about appearance, they were about identity and survival in an industry that demanded perfection. Extreme diets, weight loss pills, and even surgeries were part of her cycle. Combined with her dependency on prescription drugs, these fluctuations took a devastating toll on her body. In 2007, Anna Nicole died at just 39 years old from a drug overdose. Officially, obesity was not the cause of death, but doctors have noted that years of weight swings and unhealthy practices had weakened her system. Her body had endured too much stress from constant change. Smith's story reveals a cruel truth. The pressures of fame, combined with obesity and addiction, create a spiral from which escape is almost impossible. She remains a tragic symbol of how beauty, fame, and weight obsession can intertwine into a fatal cocktail. Looking across these stories, Elvis Presley, John Candy, Chris Farley, Mama Cass Elliot, Barry White, Ralphie May, and so many others, a painful pattern emerges. It wasn't just obesity alone that killed them. It was obesity combined with sedentary lifestyles. Many of these stars had grueling schedules that left little time for exercise, or they used food as comfort after exhausting tours and filming. Addictions. Drugs, alcohol, and overeating often went hand in hand, creating a perfect storm for heart attacks and strokes. Genetics. Several of these celebrities came from families with histories of heart disease, and obesity simply sped up the inevitable. Crash dieting. Mama Cass and Luther Vandross repeatedly tried extreme diets that weakened their bodies rather than strengthening them. Industry pressure. While thinness was demanded for many stars, comedians and certain performers were expected to stay overweight because their careers depended on their size. Obesity alone doesn't always kill, but combined with these factors, it becomes an almost unstoppable force.